Hi guys, and welcome once again to Curated Logic, where we try and up your brain game. This week's game review is of a game that was recommended to me by my younger brother. It is a game that I had not heard of before, but one that I have come to realise has a bit of a cult-like following. It is regularly cited as one of the best adventure games of all time, and although was not a commercial success on first release, it was a critical one. The game I am talking about is I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, based on the short story of the same name by Harlan Ellison. Given the last game my brother suggested to me was Return of the Obra Dinn, and I loved that game, a review for which you can find a link to below, I had trust that this game would be similarly entertaining. And whilst I won't say that this trust in my brother's opinions is completely gone, it was definitely tested by this game. The premise of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is thus. There are 5 humans whom are seemingly the last humans alive after the supercomputer AM or AM destroyed the world and everyone on it. The 5 prisoners have all been kept alive and held deep underground for 109 years, within which time AM has systematically tortured each of them to the brink of death and insanity. At the time the game starts, Am is trying something new with his torture, basing it on metaphors and analogies based on flaws each of the humans possess. In the game, the player plays each person in turn within one of these metaphorical situations, through which the character being played must show the human capability for redemption in order to succeed. This overarching quest for everyone is spelt out through the many speeches Am gives to the characters. It is only by succeeding individually and, in the end, sort of as a union, will the characters potentially be able to free themselves from the torment and defeat Am for good. Although the metaphors are sometimes a little heavy-handed, if I had to pick my favourite aspect of the game, it would indeed be the story. The premise was really intriguing from the start, but it was the seriousness and honesty of some of the parts of the characters' lives that they had to face that drew me in. So often these days, even when a game is touching on a weighty topic, they do so in a way that lacks authenticity. You don't really feel for the characters, and the topic is used more as a device for pushing the story along. This isn't the case in this game. Yes, there is some over-explanatory dialogue from the characters in these moments, but this doesn't take away from the way these topics are met head-on and with believability. When writing this, all I can think of is that initial gut punch I received whilst playing Ellen's storyline, which ended up being the first one I completed. As so often a good story can do, it raised my expectations and thoughts of the entire project, especially as up until that point, I had not been thinking the game was as great as had been said. And although the game lived up to these expectations story-wise, it unfortunately did not do so elsewhere. As the game was released in 1995, I can forgive graphics, and even the few little glitches I came across, sometimes disappearing into thin air, whilst other times interacting with an object when I was nowhere near it. I can also forgive the playability to an extent. Adventure games were, and still are, being consistently refined, and this would have been considered very advanced for its time. However, for my taste, so frustrating was the playability of the game that I ended up just trying to speed my way through it as fast as possible, rather than actually take in the experience more fully. The first part to note about playability is the action buttons. Not only are these far too specific, some actions basically doing the same thing as another one, But once you use an action on an item, it automatically reverts back to the look at action, even if it is obvious that the next thing you try and do will not be something you want to just look at. So often, I wanted the action to stay the same so I could press button after button or switch after switch. But instead, I more often than not ended up accidentally pressing the look at button again and had to hear the character's observations just one more time. If you were like me, one of the most painful parts of many adventure games is hearing the same dialogue over and over again. These buttons could have been made much simpler, or done away with altogether, with a drag or a single or double click indicating what you wanted to do with each item. The second part about playability is the puzzles in general. As anyone who knows me knows, I can love a game story and be drawn in completely, but if I do not like the puzzles, then I am not going to like the game. Although there were some puzzles that were not bad, for the most part, they were either too obvious and the solutions were put right in front of you, or the mechanics of a puzzle were not intuitive and just simply dissatisfying. This was likely made more frustrating as I saw how much potential for the puzzles there was in this game, and how it was just not lived up to. The final part about playability that I did not enjoy and is a downfall of many adventure games is the overly specific order in which you have to do tasks, to the point where you can't pick up something or interact with something because you don't know why you are doing so yet. This type of structure largely negates any feeling of choice within a game and detracts from the instinctual nature of what you are doing. No longer do you feel you have real control over what happens, it is more or less pre-designed, which, of course, as you are playing a game, it more or less is, but you don't want to feel that too heavily. This also makes doing certain tasks really confusing, as you may have a clear reason behind doing something that may even turn out to be the exact reasoning you had to do that task. But because someone hadn't said one piece of information, or you hadn't yet found one object that gave the character the idea to do that task, you are told you simply cannot. It is then so frustrating when you realize that the task you tried to complete all along is the actual task you need to do now, but you hadn't thought of it because how many times you had previously tried it in the exact same way and it had failed. Other points to note about my experience of the game are that although I forgave the 1995 graphics and glitches, I wasn't a huge fan of doors in a room often being unseen, and you having to search with your mouse until it allowed interaction. I also found the music and the sound effects sometimes a little grating, although overall, these were quite good. So, after all is said and done, I seemingly go against the grain and give I Have No Mouth and Yet Must Scream a 6 out of 10. It may have been a critical darling in 1995, and the story is touching, but for my taste, the game as a whole just hasn't held up well, especially for someone like me who is looking to play it for the puzzles. But if you do give this game a go, let me offer you some advice. The save icon is your friend. For the amount of times you are likely to die or make a mistake, especially during the end game, it is worth saving regularly, so you do not have to start each stage again and again. That is all for this review. I hope you enjoyed it and it was helpful in some way. Stay tuned this week for the walkthrough video of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, which will not only show you the best way to play and finish the game, but will also attempt to show each of the bad endings as well. And if you want to continue upping your brain game, please follow Curated Logic on any of the socials listed above or below, or you can support us through Patreon so we can keep making these videos, which is also listed above and below. I hope wherever you are in the world, you are keeping safe and happy. Until next time, keep upping your brain game and have fun. See ya.